Good afternoon. Coming up on 2 o'clock on the West Coast. Patrick Scott here. It is Friday, YouTube Live, 2 p.m. And they look a little cattywampus, but that's okay. As promised, I got a table. So you're going to see that I'm hands-free, and that when I laugh, you're going to see that I'm not bouncing, and I'm really excited about that. I actually got a table for my office here. It's one of those kind of tables that you can put over a chair, and it's really kind of nice. So no, but none of you complained. But I was noticing on some of the replays that when I laugh, the computer would bounce, or when I would gesture because I would have it like on just literally my laptop on my lap. So it's got a cup holder. It's very fun, and it wasn't expensive. So I'm really glad. Today, I want to talk about psychic ability. I want to talk about intuitive awareness. I did an interview on Facebook Live with Jocelyn Berkheimer a couple days ago. That's available somewhere. I don't know. If I was really good at this, I would link it and I'd be all dialed in. But she was asking me a lot of questions about manifesting and why would we want to be more intuitive? Why would we want to develop our intuitive abilities, our psychic abilities? What's cool is I don't get any pushback anymore. I don't get pushback really about, oh, it's too weird and it's all woo woo and I don't understand it. And if I can't see it or touch it or taste it, it doesn't exist. And I even, I work with a lot of patients, and I work with folks who are schizophrenic and who believe that they are possessed. And I had a patient who I've alluded to before, who I've worked with, and really pretty much in one session, just by virtue of the energy work and the depossession that I did, in addition to working with him clinically, he's been able to really turn his life around, and it's really gratifying. I mean, I drove home. It was my last session of the day. It was at 5 o'clock one day this week, and I was driving home, and I was feeling really satisfied. Like, it, you know, I love helping people, and it is that intuitive awareness and that psychic ability and that development that has helped me um, be a better clinician, certainly, but also manifest the life of my dreams. People say, well, how do I, you know, and we think that it's all about smart goals, and we think it's about, well, I just have to set it, and take action. And all that's true. I mean, things don't necessarily just pop out of the universe for us. But today I'm going to make a case. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background in terms of how I have become so intuitive. I used to think that people were just born with it or not. And am trained, and I have trained, and I teach a class on training people to be more intuitive. And so we'll talk about that. Jocelyn asked me some great questions about, like, so what is it? What is in it for us to care about why we are intuitive or not, and when do we ignore our intuitive messages? And so I'm going to talk a lot today about the permutations of that, what it is, what it isn't. I'm going to talk a lot about my trajectory in terms of how I came to doing this work, how I came to involving more intuitive awareness in my clinical work, in my research work, in my teaching. I teach a class, multiple classes really, but I certainly work with small groups and things on developing this. Josh says that he has put a link to this interview on his page, Joshua Hayduk, on Facebook. And I think I shared it on my page. So if you're on my Facebook page, you will see it. It's a great interview. It's about a half hour, and just interviews me just about kind of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So I believe that all of us have an intuitive body. And what I mean by that is, if you've studied NLP or if you've studied HUNA, we talk about the four bodies and the three selves. And the four bodies are your physical body, which is self-evident, your emotional body, which is where our emotions live, also pretty self-evident. We have a mental body, our thinking, which is always in the way. And we have a spiritual body. Well, I have taken that, and I believe wedged between the spiritual and the mental, we have an intuitive body. And I want you to, as you're listening to this, I want you to reflect on your own experience. Have you ever been in the car, maybe playing Spotify or Pandora or the radio when we used to have radio, and you knew the song that was going to come on the radio next. You just heard it in your mind's eye, and all of a sudden it came on. Have you ever been sitting at a stoplight in your car, and you can feel that somebody's looking at you? You can feel that their eyes are looking at you, and you turn at them, and they turn away. You've been in a mall, and you can sense that there's someone looking at you, and you look, and they turn away usually. That kind of thing. Have you known who's going to call before they call? Have you known when the phone rings who's calling? Have you known what some of your friends or family members are going to say before they say it? Have you made up when you get a rather ambiguous email or text about, can we get together and talk later this afternoon? Now, what I want to make a distinction about is the distinction between an intuitive read and fear. And we'll get into the testing and how do you know and what do you use intuitive messages for anyway. My point is, in 100% of the people I have worked with for the last almost 40 years, as an educator, as a restaurateur, as an entertainer, as a caterer, as a sommelier, on and on and on. Everybody that I've asked has a sense of things beyond them. Now, I'm not talking in a religious sense. I'm not talking about a sense of a god or a deity or a being or anything like that. I'm talking about that 100% in my anecdotal research of humans that I have surveyed. In most classes, I ask this question: how many of you have ever had a hunch, a suspicion, a prediction, a premonition, a dream that was prophetic, a prophecy, a feeling, a sensation, a curiosity, a synchronicity? Right? A coincidence. And what I get in 100% of the people that I talk to is that every single person has. Now, I don't know that I know that there's a lot of research out there. So if you want to look at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, Noetic, if you want to look at some of the Netflix documentaries, Josh has had inklings, call it what you want. Now, I have also, on the flip side, I run a clinic. Pretty big clinic here in Las Vegas. And I have a hard time keeping staff. I think we do a good job. It's a low income clinic. We can't pay $1 million. We serve the poor. These are challenging people, and we take Medicaid. And then we can't pay a therapist what they could earn in private practice. Now, there's benefits to working here. This is not a pitch to come and work here, by the way. This is I will get an email from a clinician saying, Dr. Scott, do you have a moment this afternoon? I'd like to speak to you. Now, what I make up instantly is they're quitting. Sometimes they do. Sorry. Sometimes and again, what I want to say about this is a great place to work and all that kind of thing, but understand that it's a stepping stone. So people do their practicum studies here, they do their internship here, the residency, their clinical rotations here, depending on their discipline, and then they move on. And it has been a wonderful place for almost 20 years for people to get training, and they get great training here. It's a great population, great people. It's awesome. And quite legitimately, I just had one of our clinical directors here. It was his last day just an hour ago. He bade us farewell after 16 years. He'd been here 16 years, and he got a better offer. He got a nice job offer, and we all wish him well. My point is, now this is interesting. When he said, this is 3 months ago, do you have a few minutes this afternoon? There's something I'd like to talk to you about. I instantly knew he was resigning, and I didn't want to believe it. I didn't. I was like, no, not Matt. Matt can't go. As it turns out, I was correct. My intuitive messages were correct. But I will tell you, I've had as many fear-based premonitions that have not turned out that way, like that. So I want you to start distinguishing these messages that you get. And of course, now I just need the computer on the table. I'm such a klutz. And so I want you to start making a distinction about what is fear-based, what is a suspicion that is fear-based that comes through and you go, oh my God, the sky is falling. And when is an intuitive message something that you should pay attention to, not in a fear-based anxiety way, but when is it something to pay attention to? So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about dreams today and the types of dreams and the dreams that you should look at and interpret. So in my own upbringing, I believe I was a very psychic child. I and I think most kids are. I think most children under the age of about 7, 6, 5 are really intuitive. They know things, they have imaginary friends, they have wonderful, vivid dreams, they talk to people, they see things that we don't see, and so on. Not in a schizophrenic way, not in a delusional, hallucinatory way. But I've had interesting story in my partner's family. I may get the name wrong, but you'll get the idea. So one of my partner's grand nieces, okay, so we're a little older, so grandnieces, had an imaginary friend, and I forget the name. It was an interesting name. And she was, I don't know, 4 or 5, and she kept talking about this imaginary friend who was an older man who wore a suit, who had a top hat, and we thought maybe it was she was visioning Abraham Lincoln, or she'd seen a picture of Abraham Lincoln with a top hat and all that. Well, as it turned out, she had the name, and understand that in this particular family, Irish Italian family, there are only 4 or 5 generations, and so this is great niece, and I want to say great grandmother was still alive, like that many generations when this little girl was small. And we were at a you know what? I wasn't there. I'm hearing this secondhand. I was going to say we were at a family gathering. There was a family gathering in which this child was there, and she kept talking about this man's name that no one knew. And the great grandmother said, "Does he look like this? Does he look like that? Does he look like the other thing? Is he wearing a suit? Does he have a beard? Does he have a this? Does he have that?" And apparently that was her grandfather or something. And he had an interesting name. I don't remember what the name was. It was I'm not going to even try to butcher it. It was an interesting, unique name. It wasn't John or Bob or Sam. It was some interesting name that was I'd never heard before or since. And she said, "That's my grandfather." And my grandfather is talking to this little girl. And so they had a wonderful dialogue about what he would say and where he was and what he was doing and how he supported her and all that kind of stuff. Now, that child is now an adult. And I don't know if I were to ask that child, who's now an adult, who I think has a daughter of her own now, if she remembers that. She may not. My point is that this little girl, like many children, have intuitive connections. They see and they talk to dead people. They have knowings. They have wisdom. Now, what happens when we get into school, right? 5, 6, 7, we start going to school. We start book learning. I know more than ever before, families are certainly more open to things. But I think that we learn that it's all about the thinking and it's all about okay, that's great that you were talking to a dead relative. Now it's time to go to school. It's time to learn math. It's time to learn your reading, learn your multiplication tables, learn the stuff you learn in school. And I think that what happens is we just forget. We just forget that we're intuitive. My father passed away when I was 15 months old, I believe. I have only one fleeting memory of him. He died of lung cancer. It's a long story. I don't remember anything other than that one fleeting memory. And my sister, so I was raised by a single parent in the 60s. My sister was 18 years older than I. She was 18 when I was born. My brother was 10 years older than I, 10 when I was born. I'm not good at math, but we can do that. And my sister, when I was an adult, after my mother had died, told me that when I was 4 or 5, I would take a nap. Well, I wouldn't take a nap. I was supposed to be taking a nap. And she and my mom would go to the door and they would open the door. And I'm laying on the bed and I've got my feet in the air and I'm playing with my toes. I mean, this was very specific what my sister would see. This happened a lot. And she said, and I was talking to my daddy. And I was just talking to him. And I was having a full on conversation with him. And then, and I would ask him when he's going to come and pick me up and when is he going to visit me and, do that. And I wasn't upset. Remember that when I was that young, I didn't never know what it was like to have a father. So this wasn't a grieving process as a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old. I was talking to who I thought was my dad. Now, I don't even remember this, by the way. I'm told this as an adult. So just like my grandniece by a marriage, she probably doesn't remember talking to the great, 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 great grandfather, whoever that was. I don't remember having conversations with my dad, but apparently my poor mom, because my dad was 50. when he died. My mom was like 48 or something. My sister was 18 or 20. It was tragic. I mean, it was bad. It had left us in a bad financial condition. So here we are 3 or 4 years later after my father had passed, and I'm just having these conversations with my daddy, and I'm asking him and I'm saying, "Daddy, when are you gonna come and pick me up? And when are you gonna come and visit? And I really miss you." But I'm just having a nice conversation with my dad. And those my sister told me later that they were outside the door just crying, just crying their eyes out. Now, do we know this is the other piece about intuitive stuff. Can I prove that I was talking to my daddy? No. Can I approve that this other young lady was talking to her great, great, great dead grandfather? No. But that's the point. I don't want you to kind of start with what you can prove and what you can't prove. I mentioned to Jocelyn in the interview that, or I've mentioned this in another recording. Sylvia Browne is one of my great. I'm a big fan of Sylvia Browne, Browne. She's written dozens of books, really interesting books. And she was a psychic, and she died in the last 10 years, I think. And I teach psychic development. I teach a class called STFU. I have a coaching program to help people develop their coaching awareness and their psychic awareness. I have a master class to help advanced practitioners, blah, 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 pitch over. And one of my students in the coaching program emailed me once and he said, I've done some research on Sylvia Browne, and apparently 60% of her predictions were wrong. She would predict the president or the earthquake or the fires, the floods, the lions, tigers, bears, or mine, and they were wrong. And so he was like, and he was a scientist, and he's saying, well, how could you trust anything that Sylvia Browne says if in fact 60% of her predictions were wrong? And I just said, look, listen to the information for the veracity of the information. If you read any of her books, some of them are going to ring true for you. Now, listen carefully. I'm a researcher. I do evidence-based practices. I am a clinician. I'm a doctor in a clinic that has to prove everything down to the gnat's ass every day. This kind of stuff you can't necessarily prove. But what I want you to do is I want you to start looking at your own hunches, your own suspicions. How many times do you have a suspicion or an inkling, as Josh calls it, and it turns out to be true? Now, I don't know if you want a Nobel Prize or Academy Award or whatever, but just start paying attention to those coincidences, those synchronicities, those kinds of things. Um, just to pay attention to see how many times you're actually really, really right on about certain things. Now, um, I believe when I got into school, I shut down my intuitive body, right? I just shut it down. Not consciously. I just think you get sort of occupied and we start filling these little brains with lots of book learning. And when the brain is distracted by all that book learning, we shut down or we turn down the volume of those messages. And I think that's kind of how it works. So fast forward, I'm, 15, having some experiences. I'm 20, I'm 25, I'm 35, I'm 50, start my practice. I start my study of Huna, my study of hypnosis, do past life regression. I'm a meditator. I go into trance. I'm an avid lucid dreamer, and I'm getting lots of things, but I still have that researcher point of view that I don't believe it. If I can't prove it, if I can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, it must not be true. So in my Huna studies, and those of you that have followed me for a while know that I teach Huna, Huna, which is a Hawaiian collection of shamanistic tools, very powerful, by the way, that all of a sudden, as I evolved, as I got my head out of the way and I got quiet, I started noticing things and paying attention. Now, at first, it kind of freaked me out because I did see things. I did see people. I saw dead people. I saw apparitions. I saw spirits. I saw energy. I would notice at Huna when we were doing initiations or when Kumu Matt was doing something, and I would see the energy in the room coming out of his head and his third eye and all that kind of stuff. And then I started thinking I was crazy. Now, listen carefully. Thinking I was crazy, I'd go to him or I'd go to the other teachers and say, this is what I'm seeing. Am I crazy? And they were like, no, that's how energy works. Not everybody can see it. But if you're starting to develop the capacity or the facility to see it, do that. Now, I'm fortunate enough to be in a community that supports that kind of idea. Nobody said, well, yeah, you're crazy. Let's call the ambulance. Nobody said we need to, put you into the loony bin or whatever. And so I was fortunate enough to have a community and a spiritual group of people who supported that. So then I leaned into that and just said, well, okay, if I can see that, what else can I see? Now, come full circle, now I do readings and I do remote viewing and remote healing and depossessions. And let's say 40 to 50% of my work is in the psychic realm, if you will, just readings and healings and house clearings and demonic possession removal and entity removal and things like that. And I say it matter of factly because to me, it's just another day. Not a big deal, not hard, not scary, not spooky, not woo woo, nothing. It's very sciencey. And I think that's the cool thing that I started with Jocelyn. With the most exciting thing to me is that the intersection of science and spirituality. Science is now proving what spiritual sutras and texts and sacred writings have said for thousands of years. And if you look at quantum physics, quantum mechanics, string theory, chaos theory, I just love it because what's happening is things that are parallels in multiple cultures and multiple indigenous populations around the world that we're discovering. I just kicked the table again, so I guess the table doesn't matter because I kick it. So sorry. That if you look at the multiple different populations. So my latest example. So we just taught a level 2 class at Mount Charleston here in Nevada, and Josh recommends The Field by Lynn McTaggart or The Dancing Wooly Masters. And that's Gary Zukav, Zukav. Thank you, Joshua. Thanks so much for contributing to these. So we in Hawaii, students come from all over the world to study these Hawaiian shamanistic teachings. And there is a creation chant, and it's long. It's like 4 hours long. We do have a recording of it. It's in the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. You have to make an appointment to listen to it. It's called the Kumu Lipo, Kumu, new word Lipo. I bought the text because that's who I am. I wanted to read it because I don't understand Hawaiian enough to be able to understand the whole chant. And I think we have taken some excerpts of that chant for our own use. But chanting in Hawaiian was the way that the oral tradition passed along because there was no written language. And so when I say I purchased a written version of it, somebody has translated it, and written into a book. So I bought the book. Now, interestingly, it talks about what is essentially the Big Bang Theory, which science has been talking about and proving for decades. And it's the same exact thing. And word for word, it's, in the beginning, there was nothing. I mean, I could read it to you. Actually, if I had a manual here, I could actually read to you the section of the Kumu Lipo that we use in one of our meditations that basically says, in the beginning, there was nothing, and then there was a big bang, and here we are. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Well, so 10 years ago, I'm charged by my Kumu to teach a level 1 Huna training as part of my ascension or my progress to become a Kumu, become a teacher myself. And I joke that Las Vegas is the spiritual center of the universe. And of course, there's the other saying is there's more sin per square inch here in Las Vegas than anywhere else in the world. And I joke that this is the vortex. Now, that this is the 9th island, which means this is where Hawaiians come to vacation. We in Honolulu, the weather reports report the island's weather and the weather in Las Vegas because Las Vegas is such a destination for native Hawaiians that they come here. And so I'm sitting in Las Vegas now. And I was asking my Kumu to help me find a spot to do my first level 1. And I was thinking the Strip, a lot of hotels down there. And I was thinking, it's easy. It's close to the airport. People could fly. I'm not thinking spiritual matters. I'm thinking logistics. How can people get to the airport? And are we going to pick them up and have a bus or an Uber or what is it? So he's not liking any of the spots that I'm looking at. And I went to a number of places. I went out to Lake Las Vegas, went out to Boulder City, went to various places on the Strip because, the energy just doesn't feel right. Now, this is intuitive stuff, by the way. This is how we do it. And so then I said, well, I have one more place. Let's get in the car. Now he's on speakerphone or he's on text, and I'm taking him up got my phone, and my Kumu and we're not on the phone the whole time, but I said, okay, I have to drive a place. It's going to be 45 minutes. I will call you back or text you back. So I go up to Mount Charleston. Now, Mount Charleston is about a 45-minute drive from Las Vegas. And it is a resort retreat area. It's a ski area up there. There's hiking, a lot of hiking trails, parks. It's beautiful. It's at about, I think the peak of Mount Charleston is, I think, over 12,000 feet. And it's at a higher elevation. It's cooler in the summer. A lot of families go up there for picnics in the summertime to get out of the heat, to beat the heat, because it'll be 20 degrees or so cooler up there than it is down here on the floor of the valley. So I drive up there and I find a hotel, and it's the hotel I currently use. And I think I was FaceTiming him, showing him the hotel, and we're talking because this place feels good. He said, "Do some research as to that area. It feels Native American to me." Again, he's doing an intuitive read. He's tapping in, and call it what you want to call it. He says, "It feels Native American to me. I would love to know the history of that area." So, long story short, it is the sacred tribal land of the Nuuvi tribe, which has been divided into seven tribes. Southern Paiute is the one that we know, but all through southwestern United States, through Utah and Arizona and California, and there were a number of tribes that settled in that area. Pretty much the whole southwestern region. It's a very large geographical region, and that mountain, the Spring Mountain Range, is their sacred land. So I'm bumbling along and I'm doing my research because I'm a researcher and I'm trying to find out more about the people. And they have a reservation that is down not on this land, but down on the floor of the valley. I'm learning more about their culture. And there are fewer, apparently, than 4,000 native Nuovi Southern Paiute members, tribal members anymore. There are very few of them left, but they live down on the floor of the valley. And I start to do some research, and I come upon an article that I did share with the level twos about the tribe, some sort of a research project that they underwent a few years ago. And they quote their creation. It wasn't a chant. I think it's called the creation story. And I am here to tell you, word for word, it's the same as the Kumulipo. The names are different. You know, the words are different. The sacred this is different, but the exact words of the creation story of the Native Hawaiians, and we don't know when it was written or created, right? Thousands of years. The Nuuvi tribe, we don't know when it was written, also an oral tradition, thousands of years, and they're identical, just identical. And funny kind of woo-woo story. I've said this to several people. I went up to finalize the details at the hotel, so that's where I decided to do the level one. And I was up there doing the catering and the banquets and getting the rooms reserved and meeting with the banquet manager and all that kind of stuff about this first level one training. And I had tried to find, some native people to if I could talk to, and I couldn't. And I kind of just put a call out, kind of a prayer to say, I want to please. And this is what we do in Hawaii. And it's kind of a protocol thing where you don't go onto somebody else's territory or property without asking for permission. Well, there was no mechanism to ask for literal permission. So in the Hawaiian culture, you would do what's called a pule, or a prayer. So I put a prayer out there just to say, I humbly ask to use your land for this teaching, and I want to share these sacred teachings from the Native Hawaiians on this land. I mean no harm. I will leave the land better than I brought, that kind of thing. And I think that happens in a lot of traditions, indigenous traditions. And this is freaky, so hold on. I never am able to find any actual human to talk to. So I put the prayer out there. So I'm up there signing the banquet papers. Classes in a few weeks, probably 4 weeks to 6 weeks out, as the hotels is how they are. And I go into the restaurant, and I'm with my business partner, Colleen, here at the clinic. She was helping me get the thing set up. She's also a Huna, a full initiator and a teacher. And she was helping me, as she does, and assists in the teachings, and very brilliant and masterful in her own right. And walked in, and sitting there. It's a restaurant. It's empty. It's just she and I having lunch. And I'm facing the door. She's facing me. And in walks a guy who looks like if you put Native American chief in the modern era in Hollywood Central casting, this guy would show up. The brown skin, the big nose, the beaded, beautifully beaded headband, the turquoise bling, the turquoise bling, the turquoise bling, jeans, big turquoise bling belt buckle, cowboy boots, flannel shirt, the whole show. He looked just like Native American modern chief. So I noticed him. He made eye contact with me, and we were the only people in the restaurant. It wasn't like he had a lot of choice, you know. He didn't have to make eye contact, but he made eye contact with me. He nodded and he smiled and he kind of pointed and, you know, acknowledged us. And Colleen didn't see that. So he goes to a table by himself, and later on, after lunch or whatever, she goes to the restroom, and while she's gone, he comes over to the table, and he just says hello, and I said, "Well, it's nice to see you." And he, was just trying to be pleasant. He goes, "I know who you are. Welcome to our land. Your teachings are safe here." I'm just going to let that hang in the air. And he walks out. Colleen comes back from the bathroom. I'm crying. She doesn't know what's going on. Now, from a non woo woo perspective, I wanted to know who he was. I wanted to, he didn't introduce himself. He didn't say, "Hi, I am so and so of such and such." He just said hello, what he said. And I was just completely gobsmacked, as they say. And the interesting thing was that I get varying versions of the story. And you know how things change over time. Some people thought that he was the Native American chief. Some people didn't see him and didn't say there was nobody else in the restaurant. So I don't know. Was he an angel? Was he an apparition? Did I make it up? Was it a hallucination? Was it a delusion? Did I want it to happen? I don't know. Colleen saw him, so she knows he exists and that he came into the room, and she figured out he was probably an elder, of that tribe because he just looked the part. But who knows? My point is that kind of stuff happens, and if you're open to it, to stay open to those possibilities, it is absolutely magical when those things happen. And I never did find out who he was. I never found out any name of a tribal elder. I never got a formal permission. But I will tell you, people that see energy come to my classes, and I've been doing classes there now for 10 full years. And all the people that I teach, a lot of them are psychic, they're mediums, they're trance channelers, they're very intuitive, they see energy, and many, many of them have commented that they can sense the presence, feel the presence, see the tribal elders of that land that are offering us support. And in that class, we actually make an offering to the land, which we do in the Hawaiian tradition, where you honor the land, you make an offering to the land, you do some prayer, some ritual, and we do that. I'm not going to go into those details, but the parallels are striking between the Native American tradition and the Hawaiian tradition. And from what I understand, indigenous traditions around the world that came up at different times throughout history, and a lot of the tribal customs are the same. Kumu tells a story of he met with a Native Canadian chief up in, I think, Ontario, and I could be wrong, in Canada somewhere, who his tribe was in charge of clearing spaces, and that they had an energy that would clear spaces. And we, in our Hawaiian tradition, have a symbol, Pua, a graphic that you use to help clear spaces. They compared notes. It was the same energy. Of course, the name he had was different than the name we had. And so, but it was the same energy. And so whether you look at Reiki, or you look at Ayurvedic, or you look at Chinese medicine, or you look at any of these traditions, there are striking similarities. For example, in Ayurvedic medicine, the medicine of the East Indies, from India specifically, they have what are called chakras. And chakras are these energy centers that are alleged to be in the body. The root chakra is at the base of the spine, the crown chakra is at the top of the head, and so on. And those of you that have studied with me know this very well. Well, the Hawaiians, completely independently for thousands of years, came up with their own energy centers called moku. Now, moku is the Hawaiian word for island. And so moku, and they corresponded pretty almost exactly to the Ayurvedic chakra system. I think that's pretty cool. Sorry, I think it's cool. So as you look at your evolution, some of you already past your head and past your thinking. And what I would encourage you to do, and the reason why I called the class STFU, which means what you think it means, it used to be called Psychic Development. We found it in 2020. I wrote it, I channeled it. I had a few students say, could you just please, write a course about how do you do it? How do you become more psychic? How do you become more intuitive? So I Sat down over a weekend really and just wrote the thing, just wrote the manual, wrote the slides, did it, just wrote it, and it channeled. And that's what Jocelyn in her interview with me this week was really about how effortless it is when you tap into the wisdom of the universe, you tap into the wisdom of your unconscious mind, and you just let it flow. And for those of you that are masterful at anything, you know that you can size up a situation in the blink of an eye. If you're whatever you do, whatever your craft is. And I alluded to Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, which he says if you do anything for 10 years or more as a profession, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or an engineer, anything, pick your, driving, you can pretty much drive unconsciously these days. You may not know how you get home some nights after work because it's so wet into the unconscious. There's that level of mastery, but then there's something else that you can't quantify. I should be able to understand mental health diagnoses after 40 years. I should, I have a teenager. This is funny now, people, you're going to have to laugh. Teenager of either gender comes in, surly, grumpy, does not want to be here, you know, kind of like mom or dad's making me go to therapy. So my job as the therapist of the teenager is to build rapport. I got to make sure that they trust me. Now I can't make them do anything, and I'm not their daddy. And if they don't want to be here, it's not my fault. And sometimes we get court ordered people who are just court ordered for therapy, and it's not my fault. So um, I just think this is hilarious. Surly teenager comes in, grumpy, cranky. Hi, what's going on? Nothing. What do you want to talk about? Nothing. How's it going? Fine. Do you want to be here? No. You don't want to talk about anything? No. Okay. Got it. Let me guess. Your mom's a bitch. How do you know? Oh my God. You're so psychic. How do you know my mom's a bitch? All teenagers think their parents are jerks. It goes with the territory. And so it's not a psychic read. I think you get that. It's not, I'm just trying to build rapport going, let me guess your mom's a bitch. How do you know? I think that's hilarious. People, I think it's funny. Funny as hell. They think I'm psychic and I go, and I let them think I'm psychic. I'm tapping into your mother. Your mother sets limits with you. No, you can't you can't get a tattoo at 13. No, you can't get a nose ring, at 12. No, you can't, like that. My mom's a bitch. My dad's an asshole. I think it's funny. I'm not psychic that way, but it builds rapport because they think I understand what they're going through. Okay. Anyway, so as I was coming up, I noticed that after level 3 of Hoon, I started seeing things and hearing things, and scared me a little bit at first. And so, what I would recommend for you is to not shut it down. Don't argue with it. It doesn't need to be true. It doesn't need to be real. But if you're seeing synchronicities, I had an interesting phenomenon a few years ago in Hawaii, and I didn't know what to do about it. I'm dubious about whether I should share the story. There was a guy who I saw repeatedly, like every Huna, every flight. He was on my flight from Los Angeles when I was living in Los Angeles. I would see him. He was an older man, he looked very professorial, and then I would see him in Kona, and I saw him for years. Well, one day I was in Kona, and this is the same guy, and I went up to him and I said, "Hi, you don't know me, but and then I saw him in an airport lounge, like the United Lounge or whatever in the airport. And I went up to him and I said, "Hi, I don't think we've met, but I keep seeing you. Is there something we're supposed to do?" And he just looked at me and said, "No, I don't know who you are." And he was cordial, but I could tell he was not having it. And as soon as I confronted him and said, "I keep seeing you everywhere. I'm just curious about that," I never saw him again. And for a decade, I've been seeing him 5, 6, 7 times a year. Same guy. It was very, very unmistakable. It was the same guy. And I never did find out what that was about. My point about that story is if you're having synchronicities like that, check them out. If you're having coincidence, check them out. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you anything to just investigate. And don't be so quick to write off things as coincidental like that. Premonitions you're having, suspicions you're having. So let's get to dreams. Dream interpretation is a fun thing to do. And so we've talked about it before. There are three kinds of dreams. The first kind of dream that you'll have is a data dump. And what I mean by that is your unconscious mind just offloading the events of the day. And oftentimes your data dump dreams won't make any sense at all. They will have no particular charge on them, but it's just your unconscious mind processing the activities of the day. Sometimes the data dump dream has content about the day, sometimes it doesn't. But if you wake up, you go, God, that was a weird dream. That doesn't make any sense to me. Chances are it doesn't make any sense because it's not supposed to. Second type of dream, a prophetic dream, a dream that is a prophecy or a prediction. It could be you see something down the timeline. You see yourself in a particular thing. Now, this is where it gets dicey. As I was coming up as a teacher, I would have repetitive travel dreams, and I would have dreams, and I would have repetitive classroom dreams. And I know that they were rooted in dreams had to do with missing my plane, missing my flight, missing the bus, missing the meeting. My classroom dreams had me being in front of the class and nobody was listening to me. I was talking, but I was like the Charlie Brown teacher. Wah, 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 wah. So that was obviously an insecurity. Like, why would anybody listen to me? And then the third type of dream is really more of your unconscious mind is trying to send you a message. And these are dreams that you should pay attention. You should pay attention to all the dreams, but these dreams you should really pay attention to because your unconscious mind is the repository of everything you've ever experienced, everything you've ever heard, whether you remember it or not. And I'm going to add past lives, genealogical constructs, things you've inherited from your bloodline, things that have happened in utero, childbirth, birth to 7, 7 to 12, 12 to 20, and so on. And so you can't possibly remember all of that. But if your unconscious mind is showing you some information about anything that has to do, that's repetitive, like you keep having a repetitive dream, where you have this the same dream over and over again, do an interpretation on it. Find out what it's trying to tell you because it could be that your unconscious mind is sending you a message. Now, at level 1, at HUNA, we offer you a dream interpretation class with a worksheet. What I'm going to suggest is come to level 1 with me or with anybody else and learn dream interpretation. It can be a really great guide into your unconscious mind. But number 2, there's a website that I also use as a backup, which is called dreammoods.com, www.dreammoods.com. It is the largest compendium of dream interpretations that I've ever seen. Now listen carefully. It is other people's interpretation of other people's dreams. I trust your gut a lot more than I trust other people's gut about your dreams. And so sometimes if I'm stuck, and I do this with clients as well, if I'm stuck, it's just not making any sense. I can't figure it out. I will use the keywords of the dream and put them into dreammoods.com and just come up with some ideas. And sometimes that'll jog my memory, or sometimes that'll jostle something loose. I'll go, oh, okay, that's what this is about. Because what dreammoods.com does is take common theme dreams, dreams of flying, dreams of falling, dreams of dogs and cats and things. And there are general interpretive meanings. Now, if you go onto dreammoods.com and you're looking up your dream, and it doesn't ring now listen to my language, it doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't feel like it applies to you, then it doesn't. Don't try to make it fit. I trust your interpretation much more than I trust somebody else's subjective view of generic dream interpretations. That's why we actually don't offer that website at HUNA. It's not really a HUNA thing. I just use it for my own backup because sometimes I just get really stuck. What does a giraffe mean? What does, XY, silver horse mean? What does a javelin mean? That kind of thing. And you can look up by alphabetical order any of those keywords. And so what I'd recommend in terms of dream work as you expand your intuitive awareness is keep a recorder. You can keep your phone by the bed and you can set up your button here just to go right to voice memo and just click the button and just say, giraffe, javelin, horses, grass, beanie babies, and put it back down and go to sleep. If you don't do that, and I think you all know where I'm going with this, you won't remember. And the cool thing about just capturing those keywords is once you are in a fully awakened state and you go back and you listen to your recording, or if you have a notepad by your bed, just those few keywords goes, oh, that's right. I was riding a giraffe and there was a beanie baby. I'm joking, but you get the drill. So start capturing your dreams, and that is the window into your intuitive awareness. It's also an intuitive way to begin to look at some of your own progress. I work with, not so much anymore, but I have worked with a fair number of autistic and less than verbal people. And a lot of times the progress we note is in their dreams, that they don't really talk conceptually about insight oriented psychotherapeutic modalities, but they can talk about video games, they can talk about their dreams. And so I will sometimes say, "Do you dream?" Yes. And we will do a fun project. Remember, these are developmentally delayed people, they are disabled. Um, and we'll have a fun game. We'll say, okay, just do you dream? Oh yeah, I have great dreams. Well, why don't you write them down? And we'll talk about them. And so we can go in, then we can use trance, we can use hypnosis, we can use the database, we can use the dream interpretation worksheet. But most importantly, even with people who have Down syndrome or who are pretty developmentally disabled, dreams are a great source of joy. They can be nightmares as well, but they're a great source of joy to look at the story and the symbolism. Now, understand, and we're going to wrap up here in a second. Intuitive messages, whether they're from the other side, meaning dearly departed spirit guides, higher council, um, you know, other beings, um, or your own suspicions, are not literal. They're not meant to be literal. They're not linear, also. So you can have something that just seems so out of left field. Dreams are, by their nature, symbolic, they're metaphorical. They are meant for you to look at a deeper level, well, not even necessarily a deeper level, a broader, more ambiguous level. Um, I used to have repetitive travel dreams, and I alluded to this earlier, where I would miss the plane, miss the boat, couldn't get the rental car, couldn't find my gate, couldn't. And it was when I was traveling a lot, and I was traveling a lot internationally, and I just kind of felt like I was running by the seat of my pants, which I was. So now lately, I tend to go to the same places. I know the routes. I know the flights. I tend to take the same flights. I don't have those dreams anymore at all. I haven't had them for years because I handled that. Now, that seems like a really mundane example, but it's a good example. My unconscious mind was sending me a message that my travel was excessive. It was out of hand. It was chaotic. Didn't feel organized. Felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants, which I was. Uh, and now I have changed my travel methods. I fly the same airline. I fly in and out of the same places. I try to get the same seat. Sorry, I go to the same places, and so I don't have. Now, interestingly, a few years ago, I went to Japan, and I started having that kind of chaotic dream sequence a few months before I went to Japan for fear. Going to a new place or a place I hadn't been to for a long time, don't speak the language, some insecurities. Now, it's as simple as that. I don't want it to overcomplicate or have you go having to write a scientific dissertation about your dreams. They're pretty simple, usually pretty simple. Now, messages that come in. So the question is, how do you distinguish between an intuitive message and other messages? Intuitive messages, for those of you that have just inner knowings, they're very quick and they're very flat. So when I have a fear, oh my God, Cindy's quitting. She sent me an email. That's my fear. That's my ego. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to impact me. What am I going to do? How am I going to fill her spot? How are we going to take care of the patients? That's not an intuitive message. When Cindy comes in, or doesn't come in, she sends me the message and she says, Dr. Scott, I need to talk to you this afternoon. And I go, oh, wow, she found a job or she's got a new opportunity, and it's flat. And I just hit the table again. I'm doing better. Give me a break. Oh, she got a new job. It will come in flat. Now, I can be right about her getting a new job, or I can catastrophize about her getting a new job. But the catastrophizing is not an intuitive read. When an intuitive read comes in, it is flat. It's emotionless. It's detached. It's dissociated. You don't feel attached to it. And so I've had both, where somebody said, can I talk to you? And I've kind of intuitively gone, gee, I wonder what this is about. I'll get an intuitive hit. I know that if it's flat, it's not laden with emotion, that it's not my ego or my opinion or my fears. If it comes in laden with emotion, it's all those things. So pay attention. So upcoming June 28th and 29th in Hayden, Idaho, northern Idaho, outside of Coeur d'Alene. I'm flying into Spokane. There's a 2-day STFU class. If you would like to develop your intuitive abilities to manifest brilliant abundance by getting out of your own way, come to the class. It's located about an hour outside of Spokane. It's a beautiful retreat setting. It's all private 30-acre property that is owned by friends of mine. It's going to be a very low key, very casual setting. Price of the class is $495. It's a very inexpensive 2-day class. You will get practical applications. You will get psychic readings. You will release baggage. You will learn applied kinesiology, pendulum, different kinds of ways of checking with your universe. You will learn how to meditate deeper, deepen your meditations. I will might do dream interpretation that I alluded, and you certainly will learn how to shut the F up and start listening to some of the messages that you're getting. And so please join us. Information about that is available on the website, drpatrickscott.com/live events. STFU is the name of the class. And funny anecdote, students that had taken the class early, like in the 2020 season, said, psychic development is just kind of a boring name. Can you change it? I was like, I don't know what to call it. Because, well, you're telling us to shut the F up all the time. How about STFU? Got it. And it's stuck. And so people do know. I do like to be a tad irreverent. I am not saying the F word out loud, but you know what it means, and it means shut the F up. What? Because too much thinking, too much ruminating, too much analyzing, too much, considering, fear-based, catastrophizing, the sky's falling, not intuitive. So by learning to shut the F up, you actually have access to many, many more resources than you do with all the ruminating and all the chatter. Okay? So I love you all. I will see you next time. The next Friday, I will be in Montana teaching physicians. Won't be a YouTube live, but we will see you in 2 weeks at another YouTube live. Have a great weekend, everybody.